Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Susan. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you here. For those who are joining live right now, we are going to speak to Anja Shortland. She is a professor of political economy at King's College in London. So she is up late this evening. What time is it? I think it's like 9 or something, right?
9 o'clock. It's not too bad.
Good. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I have been dying to do this topic after I read a review of your book. I can never quite get this in the camera. Kidnap, Inside the Ransom Business. And so I think that's a topic that no one is really writing about today in the news. So a good reason to visit it and learn more about it. So I'm just going to ask you a handful of questions. And for those who are tuning in, I think this will probably last about 20 minutes. In the movies, when you see someone being kidnapped, they're sort of like snatched off the side of the road and then stuffed into the boot of a car. And but that's not really how it always happens, is it? It seems like maybe it's a little bit more civilized at times.
Well, it depends. There are all sorts of ways of acquiring hostages.
Okay.
But really, that's not the difficult thing. I could kidnap people. It's not difficult.
Right.
The interesting and sophisticated thing is turning that hostage into money. I could probably kidnap you, but I would definitely be caught if I tried to sell you back to your family.
I see. Yeah.
So I'm much more interested in that economically more sophisticated transaction. How do you sell a hostage? How do you price a hostage? How do you deliver a live hostage back to the family? And why would you? So it's all of these questions.
So that we have a sense, for those of us who don't know too much about kidnapping, who are the players in a kidnap situation, from the kidnapper to the kidnapped? I know there's sort of a handful of different players. Who are they?
Well, I think the hostage, from an economic point of view, and I'm an institutional economist, is probably the least interesting person in this transaction. So for me, it's not usually necessarily the kidnapper themselves as negotiating either. So there might be a market for hostages, and somebody would then negotiate from a safe place.
Okay, so there's a negotiator.
Stakeholders of the hostage. Yeah, so it's a deal between whoever has got effective control of the hostage, and the people who can make a concession. And that might be the family, it might be a firm, if a firm has put one of their employees in harm's way, or it might be a government. So it depends on who assumes responsibility for the hostage.
And there is insurance for kidnapping.
That is right. Yeah. So
there's an insurer as well, potentially.
There's potentially an insurer. And that's, for me, the really interesting thing here, that you have a super awkward transaction between a family or a firm that's used to operating in the legal economy, that has to make a deal with somebody in the economic underworld, possibly an organization with unpleasant political aims, definitely criminal. How do you structure that transaction? How do you know the right price? How do you know that you're talking to the right people? How are you going to make a payment across that ragged transition?
You presumably can't really wire money, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, your bank's not going to help you. So how's that going to work?
Okay.
And just looking at all the things that could possibly go wrong, you think this is doomed. Yeah, this is always going to go wrong.
The easiest part, I guess, is maybe the kidnapping itself.
Yes. Well, not necessarily. I mean, if you want the CEO, then yes, you'll have to work quite hard for that. But generally, if you're out in the desert and you open up a Toyota Land Cruiser, it's not that difficult to get hostage.
And does insurance encourage more kidnapping, or does it provide sort of a tidier framework for within this to work?
Well, if they encouraged kidnapping, then they'd be shooting themselves in the foot.
Right.
So it's a really interesting balance between making kidnapping work smoothly enough so that you have a product, because if you say
dead bodies, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got to be reliable, because if you say, well, we're going to get 50% of hostages back, that's not a product, is it?
Right.
But on the other hand, if you make it smooth, you might be encouraging it. So the really interesting answer that insurers have come up with for this really difficult question is that we'll make it smooth, but we're not going to make it worthwhile. You're not going to make a profit.
Huh.
Yeah. So that's where it bites.
Smooth, but not worthwhile. Now, the folks who are insured, so say I'm working for an oil company or whatever it is, a company, and I'm being sent off to perhaps Yemen. Will I actually know I'm being insured, or do I just sort of assume I'm being insured?
If you know you're insured and you tell your kidnapper that you're insured, you've broken your contract and you're not insured anymore.
Okay.
Yeah. So the way insurance works is on that dimension of plausible deniability. Yeah. If you go to your kidnapper and say, it's all right, I'm insured for $1 million, that's the last thing that they want, because the local price for hostages, that makes kidnapping just about, might as well drive a taxi profitable, might be $10,000. Yeah, so they don't want people to start bandying around ridiculous amounts of money that will make it hugely dangerous for whoever goes into that area next, and they might not be able to afford it. So it's all about taking a step back and saying, okay, well, of course we want Susan back, but we can't do very much anyway. We certainly can't do anything very quickly. So let's talk about it.
Okay, so negotiation. Now,
exactly, but that sort of taking a step back and saying, okay, let's not rush this. That makes the opposition quite nervous, because they will have other people on their tail, and they don't want to be sitting there with a hostage for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. Yeah, so it's a sort of game where you think, okay, show me that you can do this.
Okay. Efficiently. It has to really be done very efficiently.
Yeah, but if somebody's just negotiating from the back of the car or from their grandpa's shed, you don't want to make that profitable. Because if you make that profitable, you're going to see far too much kidnapping, and the thing will become uninsurable on the cost side.
Yeah. All right. So there's different, different crime organizations around the world where kidnapping, who kidnap folks. Are there any stereotypes between them? For example, like the FARC in Colombia, or ISIS or Naxalite in India? Do they have different ways of kidnapping and how they negotiate?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So there are some cultures where kidnapping is really well entrenched. It's the way of opening a discussion. A political discussion, perhaps. Yeah, so that would be the Yemeni folks. Okay. Yeah, we need a bus route for our village, or we need a generator. So we're going to kidnap a tourist, and we're going to give them far too much, far too hot, and far too sweet tea. We're going to point guns at them, but it's going to be fine. Yeah. Naxalite India, different thing. Okay. This is about fundraising, and they know exactly who they're kidnapping, and they know exactly why they're kidnapping them at that point, because they've just come into inheritance or they've just sold a field, and it's just a form of taxation.
I see.
A lot of the FARC stuff is similar. Yeah, so with local people who weren't paying la vacuna, the vaccine. Yeah, so a lot of kidnapping is just backing up an informal tax demand. And if you're dealing with your tax base, again, it doesn't really help if you're super violent.
Right, yeah.
So you want to show them that you can do this, and that things would be nasty if they didn't comply. But if they comply, then everything resolves itself really smoothly again. So if you get kidnapped in one of those scenarios as an outsider, usually there is enough of sort of a culture of kidnapping and how you deal with hostages that links to hospitality and guests, and in a way you needn't worry too much about it as the hostage, and you just lie low and things will be resolved in the background.
What are some stats?
Very, very different if you're talking about Mexican drug gangs, and then things get very nasty very, very quickly because it's a culture of violence and threats and people not caring about killing people.
Yeah,
or doing really, really nasty things to them. So that's completely different. So yeah, there are cultures of kidnapping, and the better you understand the culture of kidnapping, the better you are able to deal with it.
Okay.
But as an individual, you wouldn't be. But as an insured person, you can then plug into the knowledge that the insurers and the crisis responders have for dealing with various kidnap scenarios. And they know exactly what to say to keep the hostage safe in different scenarios.
Can you give us some stats of how long people tend to be kidnapped for, and they remain hostages for how many weeks, days, or months, and then how what the percentage is of people being returned alive?
Well, the very large majority of kidnaps are resolved within a week. So
wow.
That's the good news.
Okay. We don't hear about those ones in the media.
We don't hear about these ones. We hear about the ones that go wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
but the absolutely fascinating statistic, which motivated my book, is the 97.5% of insured hostages come back alive.
Wow. Okay.
That's a product. There's some people who will die of pre-existing medical conditions, and every now and then someone tries to escape and aggravates their captors. But
don't
generally,
try to escape.
Everyone's kept reassuring me, murder is not part of this business because it doesn't make business sense.
Okay. What are the challenges for the kidnappers?
Well, it's mostly not being caught with a hostage on their hands.
Okay.
And picking up the money.
And how is
place of safety?
How is the money received? Is it in cash? Do they wire the money, or?
Interestingly, it's still mostly in cash and unmarked cash and dollar bills, even in Somalia. They will ask for the currency that they want.
Dollar bills that keep getting reused, probably within the.
Yeah, absolutely right. But again, and as an economist, this was really, really fascinating to me that lots of different countries have evolved different ways of dealing with that really awkward, here is the money, give me the hostage scenario.
Examples. Give us a couple of examples.
Yeah, so the Somali one, they at first they just paid it in Nairobi in a hotel, or in hotels that were owned by Somali businessmen, and then the Somali businessmen in Nairobi were a bit greedy and they took big cuts.
Okay.
So they're like, well, you deliver it to us, and then people were scratching their heads and saying, okay, how are we going to get it? So somebody said, I'm going to take a tugboat, I'm going to drive it up the Somali coast, I'm going to fight my way up the Somali coast. And they would deliver $1 million ransom, and it cost them $2 million to do it.
Do it. Wow.
But it was clearly not really sustainable. So then they said, okay, somebody said, I can fly a plane. And that was the way that they did it in the end. It cost about $300,000, but they could drop the money right next to the boats, and that made sure that it got to the right people.
Okay.
Without engaging with any other bandits on the ocean or otherwise. So, but yeah, with the FARC, you could just send your envoy into FARC territory.
You tell a great story in the book about a fellow who's I think he's in Colombia, and it just sounded very efficient, where it was he needed to pay a tax. Can you tell that story briefly?
Yeah, so, I mean, the other side of insuring kidnap for ransom is to make sure that the kidnap doesn't happen in the first place.
Okay.
Yeah, so plan A is your customers don't get kidnapped. You help your customers not to get kidnapped.
Okay.
And that means that they need to be aware of the local customs, and the local community needs to be on board with whatever they're doing, whatever their business does. It needs to do something that is appreciated and wanted by the local elite, whether that is delivering oil or bringing in aid or reporting or whatever people want to do. The local community needs to be happy with that, broadly happy with that.
Okay.
So how do you get them to be happy with it? Well, you need to leave some money in the right hands. Yeah. So
a tax of sorts, I guess.
That's right. Yeah. So you would always pay one to the government, but the government might be completely irrelevant in whatever oil-rich backwater of the country you are. The local people will never see any of that money.
I see, yeah.
But they need to be happy for you to build oil pipelines, to build oil wells, to pour poison into their environment, etc. So you need to come to some sort of accommodation, and that means that you're also going to pay local taxes in some form or other. But if you start talking about paying taxes to a local warlord, then your shareholders will start saying, we're not really sure about that.
Okay.
So
that's not going to be in the annual.
How do you create a protection contract? But coming back to the story of the Colombian, for the Colombian, it was completely clear that if he wanted to do business in this particular area of the country that was controlled by the FARC, that yes, he would have to pay a certain amount of money that would still give him enough profits to do it, but it would go to the FARC. There would be a roadblock, maybe pay, And when you didn't, his friend got kidnapped. And he followed his friend into the jungle, and we put to the FARC camp, through to the FARC camp, and they said, of course, you should have paid the tax, shouldn't you?
I see.
And said, okay, well, we'll have to pay a fine then. And he was led to the accountant, and the accountant was looked up his company and said, your fine will be 5 times the amount of the tax bill. And he said, okay, yes, sorry. And then he drove out with his friend and paid the fine 10 days later. So, but they all know that they need each other to do business.
Yeah, because they want the foreign money still in that area, presumably.
It was a local business, but yeah, if they want the foreign money, they can't cut a swathe through the employees, and they can't keep kidnapping them, because at some stage companies are just saying, okay, well, we're not interested in being right here. And also, again, with insurance, you get that bundling. So if all the companies on an oil field are insured through Lloyd's of London, which there would be, then Lloyd's can say, okay, well, this is getting too dangerous here. We're going to pull all of them out.
Oh, okay. So.
And then the local warlord will really wonder whether they're doing the right thing, whether their policy is really working for them, when all the taxes go missing suddenly. So it gives you a much better negotiating position.
Yeah. Are there ever kidnapping booms in certain parts of the world, and then the market goes crazy and a company?
Absolutely, yes. So
any examples of that?
Super interesting product, in that it's really grown to what it is now, which is very, very sophisticated, by trial and error. So every time people get things wrong, and every time people get nervous or just frightened, and they say, okay, whatever it takes, I just want to throw money at the problem, then you make kidnapping profitable. And then criminal communities say, well, is there anything better to do than going pirating or picking up tipsy tourists or whatever? So every time you lose control of that ransoming process, for whatever reason, then you will get a local kidnapping boom because people talk. And then the question is, can you put the genie back into the bottle? But yeah, the really interesting example of that is Somali piracy.
Okay.
For years and years, decades, the Somalis have always kidnapped or hijacked half a dozen boats. They always let them go for $100,000. And then somebody came up and said, okay, I know how this works. I know it takes 3 months, costs $100,000. We want our people back now, but quite happily give you $1 million.
Right.
And that just completely changed the game, because I said, well, why are we giving things back for 100,000 if the actual price is $1 million? And then somebody said, well, why $1 million? What's special about $1 million? Let's ask for 3. Maybe we get 2. Yeah. So the only way of getting that problem sorted out was to make it impossible to kidnap.
Okay.
Yeah. So what you saw first the naval effort, and following that private security, because they said, well, once it gets to ransoming stage, we don't have an equilibrium. We're not sure whether people are going to come. If it's fine if everyone knows it's going to be 3 months, or it's going to be 10 days, or it's going to be 5 days, it's going to cost so much. But if it stretches to 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, and it goes up into the stratosphere, that's not insurable.
Right. Are you safer traveling with or without security?
Again, such a local, a question that you can only really answer at the local level. So I remember asking somebody, I said, well, I might want to do some research in Somalia, and I knew I would have felt really safe with him. And he said, no, it's a really bad idea. This would be considered a provocation. Tell them you're coming. Hire the person who comes, picks you up at the airport. They sort it out beforehand. He's the one. Nuts. People have done it. I haven't done it myself, but people who have thrown themselves on the local on the local security arrangements have done really well with that. So much better than trying to provoke a response and coming there with armed guards, because they feel annoyed because it's their territory. Yeah. And in most places, you're not really allowed to anyway. There's really, really big issues about sovereignty. If you said, okay, we're going to bring our own army,
right,
for your oil field, it's not going to fly, is it?
Yeah. Have you ever been kidnapped on researching this book or your work?
No, and I'm not planning to either.
Okay. I mean, I suppose perhaps one might not even know one's being kidnapped the way you're describing it. If it you just think
I think you do know, and it is frightening, and it's supposed to be frightening,
right?
And the pressure that is being applied during the negotiation. It's meant to make things really, really tense.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not fun, but it's not terribly unsafe either.
Okay, one final question, and then we'll let you go, because I know it's not that late, but the evening in London. Do the negotiators, which sort of seem to me like they operate in this very gray area of legal or not legal, do the negotiators and kidnappers, are they friends? Do they respect each other? Is there sort of an equilibrium? They need each other?
No, I don't. I never got that impression.
Okay.
There is perhaps respect for the enemy, but generally this is very, very black and white.
Okay, they don't know each other beforehand.
They may have talked to each other before. There might be, but they know each other well enough, or the negotiators know them well enough to know how not to aggravate them.
Yeah.
How to get the best possible deal for the hostage, get the hostage back safely. So they will have that knowledge, but there was never any sense that they're in cahoots with each other, or that they ever try anything less than the very, very best to drive down the ransom subject to retrieving the hostage safely.
Yeah.
I just didn't see ultimately any sympathy for people holding other people hostage.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah. I think that's it. Is there anything else you would like us to know about the book, or that you're working on? I know you also work on art and antiquities.
That's right. Yes. I'm still interested.
Tell us a little bit about that. Is it art thievery, like art that's stolen, or?
It is indeed, yeah. So I'm still interested in the idea that insurers might be managing things in the economic underworld in such a way as to make crime insurable. So
how does that apply on, say, with ancient art and antiquities? Is it that
it's about making stolen art unsaleable, creating massive barriers to putting stolen and looted art into the proper art market.
Right.
And therefore creating a basis. It's kind of like a hostage scenario, isn't it? Right. Yeah. You can't sell it. But there's you could sell it in the black market, but at 10% of its value. So can we talk about how you're going to give it back to its lawful owner? But you do find that with major art collection, everyone knows that you can't sell a Van Gogh, you can't sell a Picasso. You're much better off stealing the computer. but that's not the natural way of things happening. Yeah, this is because insurers have created the institutions that make it impossible to acquire stolen art in good faith.
Yeah, but someone's always going to want the Van Gogh, because there's going to be an ego of someone who's very wealthy who wants.
Yes, okay. Then they die, and then somebody's going to try and sell it, and then they find they can't. It's not fast. It's different from a live hostage. Yeah, things stay for 20 years. But we get them back. But again, just like the hostage project, there's the plan A is it doesn't happen.
I see.
Yeah? Your Van Gogh is safe because it's not a commercial proposition to steal it. Yeah, so most things don't get stolen, and if something gets stolen, we have a way of getting it back. Mm-hmm. It's not going to give you a profit, and that's super interesting. And interestingly, it's the same people who are insuring art as the people who are insuring kidnap for ransom.
And that's mostly Lloyd's in London.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
So it's Lloyd's of London again that's created the institutions that make it difficult to sell or buy these things, but also if you want to get insurance for it, or if you want to lend it to a museum or become a donor to the Metropolitan Museum of Art because you're a rich New Yorker, well, you can't donate stolen art anymore.
But you could actually for a while, right?
Yes, exactly. So that's my interest as an institutional economist. How do these institutions get created over time?
And then,
but with art insurance, when prices go through the roof, you'd think, well, so should art thefts. But they don't, because insurers are making it so difficult to do anything with stolen art.
But they also do feed off your fear if you are the art collector, I guess.
Well, there is a background threat.
Yeah.
Just like with kidnap for ransom. Yeah, they don't invent that threat. They don't create the threat. The threat is there. The question is, how do you deal with that threat sensibly so that you mitigate the bad effects if it happens. But if you can do something to make it not happen, so much better.
Right. Does the value of art go up if if the provenance shows that it's been stolen and retrieved? I guess maybe if it's received a lot of press.
Well, it depends. Sometimes there's a good story, and I'm writing a book of stories at the moment, and sometimes the story of the retrieval is so fantastic that it adds value,
right,
to the painting when it comes back onto the market, because people like stories. I mean, people put swastikas on the back of their pictures because then it looks like it's sort of,
it was Nazi art that was stolen.
Exactly. Yeah. So people want to talk about art. So any talking point can be good. But yeah, if you've got an awkward gap in your provenance, that kills the market for that particular piece of art, and that's what they're trading on. They've killed the market for that by saying provenance matters. We wouldn't have all of this if it wasn't in the insurer's interest to do so.
When is your next book coming out?
Probably early next year.
That's exciting. And what is the name of it?
Not quite sure, but it's going to be the Art Loss Register's case book as a subtitle, because although I'm interested in the institutions, it's all about the stories driving it, and what can we learn about how to create institutions that very cheaply and very successfully discourage a whole host of crimes.
Right.
And about the way that the public sector and the private sector have to work together. Because in the end, if you can afford $30 million Picasso and somebody steals it, it's kind of not of national importance to give it back to you when there's gun crime and knife crime and drugs and things like that. So the state is perhaps slightly too relaxed about property crime at the moment. So how does the private sector step in to fill that gap?
Oh, well, thank you so much for talking to us, Anja.
No problem at all. It's been lovely to talk to you, and I hope next time you do cook for me.
Well, it was so great. So for folks who are just watching, here is her book, Kidnap, Inside the Ransom Business. And thank you so much for joining. Thanks. Have a great evening.
No problem at all. Bye. Good night.
Bye.